Imagine standing at a high-security military checkpoint in a conflict zone. You're watching vehicles roll through, tensions are incredibly high, and, the threat of hidden explosives is just a constant reality.
Right. It's a terrifying high-stakes environment for anyone to be in.
Exactly. But to maintain safety, the guards don't pull out ground-penetrating radar or, thermal imaging, not even trained sniffer dogs. Instead, a guard pulls out a plastic handle with a freely swinging metal antenna attached to the end.
Yeah, just a piece of plastic and metal.
Right, and he points it at a passing truck and literally just waits for the antenna to magically cross over to indicate a bomb.
Which is, it's wild. It sounds like a scene from some dystopian satire.
It really does. But this was a terrifying real-world scenario playing out as recently as 2016, because the technology they were relying on wasn't technology at all. It was a modern plastic reincarnation of a 16th century magic trick.
And that's because the human mind just possesses this incredible capacity to deceive itself, especially when the stakes are literally life and death. That desire for a simple, visible answer in a chaotic world can just completely override centuries of scientific advancement.
Welcome to a new deep dive. Today we're focusing on a centuries-old, highly controversial, and strangely enduring practice known as dowsing. You might also know it as water divining, or doodlebugging, or water witching.
Yeah, doodlebugging is such a funny term for it, but the history is actually incredibly dark and complex.
Totally. The source material for this exploration is a comprehensive Wikipedia article detailing the historical origins of dowsing, the surprisingly specific physical equipment involved, the rigorous scientific evaluations designed to test it, and, as we mentioned, the alarming modern applications that have infiltrated major institutions.
So our mission today is to trace the lineage of this practice. We really want to understand how something once explicitly condemned by major religious institutions as occultism not only survived into the modern era, but, actively thrived.
And it requires unpacking the fascinating psychological quirks that make the practice feel undeniably real to the person holding the stick. Plus, examining the high-stakes consequences that unfold when institutions mistake human psychology for physics. Okay, let's unpack this, because tracking how a piece of wood eventually became a piece of tactical military gear means going back to the very beginning.
Right, and those origins, they don't lie in a scientific laboratory. They start deep inside the treacherous, pitch-black, mountainous regions of 16th century Germany.
Yeah, Georgius Agricola's 1556 book, De Re Metallica, it paints this really vivid picture. You have German miners wandering through these incredibly dangerous environments, their fists just clenched tightly around forked twigs.
Just waiting in the dark.
Exactly, waiting for the wood to spontaneously twist and point them toward hidden veins of metal ore.
And that German mining culture is the exact birthplace of the terminology we still use today.
Yeah.
So in Middle Low German, this forked stick was called a Schlagerut.
Which translates to what? Striking rod?
Literally striking rod, yeah. And during that era, German deep mining technology was basically the most advanced in the world. So when those miners migrated to England to work in the tin mines of Cornwall and Devon, they naturally brought their striking rods with them.
Oh, that makes sense. A kind of technological transfer, even if the tech was just a twig.
Exactly. And the local Cornish dialect eventually morphed that German concept into the word "duschen," meaning to strike, which then softened into the English word we use today, which is douse.
Douse, wow. But the spread of this practice wasn't exactly celebrated by everyone, right? It was incredibly polarized.
Oh, massively. It drew the fury of some of the most powerful figures in history.
Like Martin Luther.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
In 1518, the Protestant reformer Martin Luther actually issued an explicit ban on dowsing for metals.
Because he thought it was a scam.
No, not a scam. He didn't view it as a harmless superstition at all. He categorized it as a direct breach of the first commandment.
Oh, wow. So he took it very seriously.
Very. To Luther, relying on a twitching stick was relying on unseen demonic forces. It was pure occultism.
And he wasn't the only one. The religious opposition was fierce. There was a 1662 decree by a Jesuit scholar, Gaspar Schott, who declared divining with rods to be blatantly satanic.
Yeah, and the stakes of using this tool escalated dramatically a bit later in 17th century France, because suddenly dowsing was no longer just being used to find underground silver or water.
Right. The sources say it was being deployed by authorities to track down criminals and hunt heretics.
Which is terrifying. The potential for horrific abuse was so glaring that the Inquisition itself intervened. In 1701, they issued a formal decree forbidding the use of dowsing for any purposes of justice.
But here's what I find so weird. At the exact same time the Inquisition is banning it, other religious figures are recording dowsing as a divine miracle.
Oh, right, the St. Teresa story.
Yeah. The source material highlights this bizarre anomaly from 1568. So St. Teresa of Spain was offered a barren plot of land for a new convent, but the site was entirely without water.
Which is a deal breaker.
Obviously. But then, out of nowhere, a friar named Antonio arrives at the twig. He paces the ground, makes some sweeping movements, and St. Teresa later noted she wasn't sure if he was making the sign of the cross or just waving the stick, and he suddenly halts, points to the dirt, and commands them to dig.
And they actually find water.
They strike a copious, unending fount of water. And St. Teresa, completely unfamiliar with this German mining trick, assumes she has just witnessed a literal miracle handed down by God.
It's so fascinating, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, survival and extreme need will always outpace theological debates.
What do you mean?
Well, German miners brought the striking rod to England because failing to find tin meant starvation. English settlers carried the practice to the American frontier because establishing a homestead in the Dakota Territory required water.
Right, and digging a dry well out there could literally cost a family their lives.
Exactly. When human survival is on the line, pragmatic results or even just the illusion of control take precedence over what Martin Luther thought in 1518. Necessity just breeds this profound tolerance for the inexplicable.
So, okay, how did a practice so heavily condemned as satanic witchcraft become a completely normalized practical tool for those homesteaders? I mean, what are the actual mechanics of the tools they were using?
Well, if you're staking your life on a piece of wood, the physical design of that tool becomes incredibly important. The arsenal of divination is actually surprisingly specific.
Right, it's not just any stick you pick up off the ground.
No, the iconic tool, the one etched into our cultural imagination, is the Y-shaped twig. Practitioners historically mandate that it be freshly cut from a tree, ensuring the wood is flexible and alive.
And the type of wood matters too, right?
Yeah, the preferred species changes depending on the local flora. European dowsers traditionally seek out hazel twigs. But in the U.S., practitioners often carve their rods from witch hazels, willow, or peach trees.
But the technique for holding this twig is not a relaxed grip. The dowser takes the two forked ends, one in each hand, with the main stem pointing straight ahead.
Right, and they clench their fists really tightly.
Tightly, turning their wrists so their thumbs are pointing outward. And that puts the entire branch under immense physical tension. Then they walk slowly, just waiting for the stem to violently dip or twitch.
And as the practice evolved, the equipment evolved too.
Yeah.
The modern era introduced those L-shaped metal rods.
Like bent coat hangers.
Yeah, often literally made from wire coat hangers or utility flags. A dowser holds one in each hand by the short arm of the L, keeping them completely upright.
But they want them to swing freely, right?
Exactly. So to remove friction from the equation, these metal rods are often placed inside hollow tubes. As the practitioner walks over a target, the rods will theoretically swing outward, away from each other, or cross inward to form an X.
And some people just use a simple pendulum, too, holding a small weight suspended on a short cord and, interpreting the direction of its swing.
Which naturally leads to people trying to explain why these things move. Because the natural human urge to rationalize the bizarre led to some pretty wild scientific theories in the 18th century.
Oh, like William Price in 1778.
Yes. He published this highly detailed theory attempting to map Enlightenment-era physics onto this practice. He proposed the existence of something called effluvia.
Effluvia? Like a gas?
Kind of. The idea was that underground minerals or water sources emitted invisible vapors or physical particles that rose straight up through the soil.
And those particles somehow move the wood?
Yeah, the theory was that when these particles hit the porous, freshly cut wood of the dowsing rod, they physically entered the grain of the wood, literally forcing the branch to bow downward to align with the vertical column of vapor.
I mean, he was trying to be logical. He was observing a real phenomenon. The stick was undeniably moving and attempting to construct a rational external cause for it.
Because the movement felt entirely separate from the dowser's conscious intention. So the assumption was that an invisible external force had to be responsible.
Think about balancing a broom straight up on the palm of your hand. Have you ever tried to do that?
Oh, yeah. You look ridiculous doing it.
Right, because keeping that broom upright requires constant, frantic micro-adjustments from your arm and shoulder muscles. It is a state of highly unstable equilibrium.
That's a great analogy.
Well, when a dowser twists a fresh, springy Y branch into a state of massive tension or holds two frictionless L rods upright in metal tubes, aren't they deliberately creating an incredibly unstable physical environment? I mean, is the design of the tool just meant to amplify tiny accidental movements?
Yes, that physical instability is the entire engine of the practice. The scientific community universally recognizes dowsing as a pseudoscience, and the actual mechanism driving the movement of the rod is a well-documented psychological trait.
Which is called the ideomotor phenomenon, right?
Exactly, the ghost in the machine. Unpacking the psychology here reveals something incredible about how the human brain partitions information.
Okay, break that down for us, because if it's just random chance, why do dowsers swear by it so fiercely? The rod moving feels like a violent external force to them. How can our brains essentially hijack our own hands without us realizing it?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the ideomotor phenomenon allows the subconscious mind to dictate physical movement without the conscious mind ever giving permission.
Wow.
Yeah, the brain is constantly processing an ocean of environmental data that the conscious mind just ignores. So a dowser walking a field might subconsciously register a subtle depression in the topography, or maybe a sudden patch of deeply green vegetation.
Or a change in the soil that suggests water.
Precisely. The subconscious mind processes that clue and sends a microscopic electrical impulse to the muscles in the arms and hands.
And because the dowser is holding that stick under immense physical tension, trying desperately to keep it perfectly still, that microscopic muscle twitch acts like a trigger on a loaded spring.
Exactly. The tension releases and the rod snaps downward.
And to the dowser, whose conscious mind was completely unaware of the muscle twitch, that sudden, violent release of energy feels like an external force ripping the stick toward the ground.
I mean, it can be so violent it literally strips the bark off the branch.
That's insane. And that visceral physical feedback must be incredibly convincing.
Oh, it is. Combine that ideomotor snap with standard confirmation bias, and a deeply entrenched belief system forms. If a dowser is walking over favorable terrain with a uniform water table, digging a hole almost anywhere will yield water.
Oh, so they're basically guaranteed to hit water anyway.
In certain areas, yes. And when they find water where the stick pointed, the belief is cemented forever. The hits are remembered as absolute proof, and the misses are easily rationalized away as human error or, a blocked underground string.
But because that internal physical conviction is so overwhelming for the practitioner, merely explaining the psychology was never going to convince anyone.
Never.
So the scientific community had to design rigorous, bulletproof tests to completely isolate the human psychology from any actual physical detection.
And they did. One of the earliest massive controlled studies took place in New Zealand in 1948. A researcher named P.A. Ongley designed a sprawling experiment involving 75 separate dowsers.
75 is a good sample size.
Very good. The parameters were strictly controlled to test their ability to detect hidden water. And the final data showed zero accuracy. Zero. Not a single one of the 75 participants demonstrated any ability to find water at a rate better than blind random chance.
Wow. And as the decades progressed, the testing protocols became increasingly sophisticated, right? To eliminate any subconscious visual cues.
Yeah, like the 1991 double-blind study in Kassel, Germany. It featured the famous scientific skeptic James Randi.
Oh, Randi didn't mess around.
Not at all. A $10,000 prize was placed on the table for any dowser who could successfully prove their ability.
How did they set it up?
Well, the researchers buried a series of plastic pipes nearly 2 feet underground across a completely level field. They had a centralized system where they could randomly control exactly which pipes had water rushing through them and which were bone dry.
Okay, that is a fantastic setup.
Right. Around 30 dowsers agreed to the parameters. And in a crucial step, every single participant signed a formal statement before the experiment began, confirming that they agreed the test was completely fair, the conditions were optimal, and they expected a 100% success rate.
So no excuses afterward.
Exactly. Over 3 days, they walked the field. When the data was unblinded, the results were entirely indistinguishable from random chance. The $10,000 prize remained untouched.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. The history of scientific testing isn't just a clean sweep of debunking. There is a notorious anomaly from 1990 known as the Betz study conducted in Munich.
Ah, the Betz study, yes.
A team of scientists led by Hans-Dieter Betz launched this massive undertaking. They initially screened an astounding 500 dowsers, eventually whittling the pool down to the 43 individuals they deemed the absolute elite experts.
Right, the best of the best.
Yeah. The testing ground was a two-story barn. A water pipe was placed on the ground floor, and it could be moved perpendicular to the flow of the water. The dowsers were positioned on the upper floor, completely blind to the movements below, and asked to track the pipe's location.
And this wasn't a quick test either. Over a 2-year period, the team ran 843 individual tests.
And what did they find?
When the dust settled, at least 37 of those 43 pre-selected elite dowsers showed absolutely no ability to find the pipe.
Which you'd think would end the debate.
You'd think. However, Betts and his team isolated the data from the remaining 6 dowsers. They claimed these 6 individuals showed results that were slightly better than pure chance. And based entirely on the performance of those 6 people, the researchers published a conclusion stating that a real core of dowser phenomena could be regarded as empirically proven.
That's a huge claim to make in a scientific paper.
It was huge. But 5 years later, a physiology professor named Jim T. Enright scrutinized that published data and completely dismantled the conclusion.
How did he dismantle it?
Enright discovered that the researchers had engaged in a practice of highly unconventional and customized data analysis. When Enright looked at the raw numbers, the absolute best dowser in the entire Munich study, the crown jewel of their findings, was, on average, a mere 4 millimeters closer to the target than a completely blind midline guess.
Wait, 4 millimeters?
4 millimeters. Across a testing span of 10 meters, the empirically proven psychic ability amounted to a fraction of an inch.
It's like shooting an arrow into a blank wall and then walking up and drawing the bullseye around wherever it landed.
That is exactly what it is. It highlights the danger of manipulating statistical thresholds after an experiment has concluded. Enright also noted a glaring inconsistency. When the data for those 6 successful dowsers was examined across separate, individual tests rather than aggregated into one lump sum, their performance completely flatlined back to random chance.
So they just got lucky on a few clustered guesses. Imagine sitting at a casino slot machine for 3 days straight, pulling the lever thousands of times and losing almost every penny. But at one point, you hit a $20 payout.
Yeah.
If you took the security footage of the casino, cropped out the 3 days of losing, and published a 10-second video of that single payout, you could claim you had empirically proven a system for beating the house.
That's spot on. That is essentially what the Munich researchers did with their data to manufacture a successful outcome.
But despite rigorous scientific debunking from figures like Enright and Randy, the practice of dowsing did not fade into the annals of history alongside leech therapy or alchemy.
No, it didn't. Instead, it managed to heavily infiltrate incredibly high-stakes, life-or-death modern situations.
Yeah, moving from quirky historical footnotes into genuine modern danger reveals a deeply unsettling reality. Because it is one thing for a neighbor to use a hazel stick to pick a spot for a backyard well, or, for dowsing to serve as a whimsical plot device in pop culture.
Right, like in Coraline or something.
Exactly. But the source material outlines how utility companies and modern militaries have actively deployed this pseudoscience.
The persistence of the practice in the corporate sector alone is staggering. Like in 2017, a public inquiry revealed that multiple major water companies in the United Kingdom were still actively employing engineers who used divining rods to locate underground pipe leaks.
In 2017?
Yes. And the revelation sparked a massive wave of public outrage as citizens realized their utility bills were funding a medieval superstition.
I'd be furious, too. But the military history is even more alarming. During the agonizing trench warfare of the Gallipoli campaign in World War I, a sapper named Stephen Kelly achieved widespread fame for supposedly dowsing for water to supply desperate British troops.
Yeah, and it didn't stop there. Decades later, during the Vietnam War, elements within the U.S. Marines were actually trained to use dowsing rods in an attempt to locate hidden enemy weapons caches and subterranean tunnel networks.
Which is terrifying when you think about the consequences of a false negative.
Exactly. Even search and rescue operations fell victim to the allure. In 1986, an avalanche buried 31 soldiers during a NATO drill in Norway, and the Norwegian army actively incorporated dowsing into their desperate search methods.
This historical willingness of militaries to embrace magic during moments of extreme crisis really laid the groundwork for a catastrophic wave of fraud in the 21st century.
It did, because fraudsters started capitalizing on the psychological vulnerability of soldiers facing invisible threats. They began manufacturing devices modeled entirely on the mechanics of the dowsing rod.
And these devices were marketed as ultra-high-tech, sophisticated explosive detectors. They bore official-sounding names like the ADE-651, the SNIF-X, and the GT-200.
And these were not just harmless plastic toys sold in novelty shops. They were actively marketed to police forces and defense departments globally.
The U.S. Department of Defense actually procured Sniffx rods in 2007. They completely ignored the fact that the U.S. Navy had already run rigorous controlled tests on the devices and proven they were entirely fraudulent.
It's unbelievable. But the most devastating deployment of this fraud occurred in Iraq. The ADE 651 fake bomb detectors became a staple at high-security military and police checkpoints across the country.
Which brings us right back to that scenario at the beginning. Guards were waving empty plastic handles with swinging antennas at vehicles, trusting the ideomotor phenomenon to detect C4 explosives.
And it wasn't until 2016, following a series of horrific mass casualty bombings in Baghdad, that the Prime Minister of Iraq finally issued a direct order forcing the police to abandon the devices.
It's just devastating. This raises such an important question about the architecture of human psychology and institutional failure.
Well, when human beings are confronted with the terrifying randomness of an improvised explosive device or the desperate ticking clock of an avalanche, the psychological craving for agency becomes overwhelmingly powerful.
So what does this all mean? How does a massive, heavily funded modern military bureaucracy possessing satellites, thermal imaging, and advanced ground-penetrating radar end up purchasing a plastic variation of a willow branch?
The answer lies in the visceral nature of the feedback loop. Radar and thermal imaging are essentially black boxes. They require the user to place their trust in an invisible, highly complex system of software and wavelengths.
Right, you're just looking at a screen.
Yeah. But a rod that suddenly swings outward in your own hand, that provides a tangible, physical sensation of discovery. It grants the illusion of immediate personal control over a terrifying environment.
And fraudsters deeply understood this psychological vulnerability.
Absolutely. They took the exact same 16th century ideomotor effect that convinced German miners to dig for silver, wrapped it in black plastic to make it look like modern technology, and sold the illusion of certainty to institutions that were desperate to buy it.
Tracing the lineage of this practice is a deeply sobering experience. A technique born in the pitch-black mines of 16th century Germany evolved into a global phenomenon.
It survived the wrath of Martin Luther, outlasted the decrees of the Inquisition, crossed oceans to the American frontier, and eventually found its way into the hands of guards at modern military checkpoints.
And through all those centuries, across all those continents, the practice was powered entirely by the invisible engine of the human subconscious, amplified by our profound vulnerability to confirmation bias.
You know, understanding the mechanics of dowsing provides such a clear lens through which to view human behavior. If the subconscious mind possesses the raw power to literally force the muscles in our hands to move, and to do so with such seamless deception that our conscious mind genuinely believes a magical external force is responsible, it really invites a deeper self-reflection.
Oh, definitely.
It makes you wonder, what other deeply held beliefs, daily intuitions, or unshakable gut feelings that you experience implicitly are not the profound insights you assume them to be, but simply your own brain's ideomotor response to navigating a chaotic world?
It fundamentally reshapes how we view certainty. The assumption is always that technology provides the ultimate diagnostic clarity. But it turns out the murkiest, most baffling, and most easily manipulated piece of technology discussed today isn't the hazel stick cut from a tree, and it isn't the fake plastic bomb detector.
No, not at all.
It is the human brain holding them.
I want you to take a second and just imagine your favorite food delivery app.
Oh, like the one you probably used a couple of days ago.
Yeah, exactly. Picture the entire infrastructure that is just running silently in the background just to get, a sandwich to your door.
Right. It's a lot.
It's massive. You've got GPS tracking every single turn. There are smartphones in the hands of every driver, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these complex routing algorithms constantly updating for traffic in real time. Plus, like massive cloud servers holding the whole operation together.
It's basically a supercomputer orchestrating your lunch.
Exactly. Now, I want you to imagine stripping all of that away.
Oh, boy.
No GPS, no smartphones, no internet connection whatsoever.
Just completely dark, technologically speaking.
Right. But but you still have to maintain the exact same massive volume of daily deliveries across one of the most densely populated cities on Earth.
Which sounds impossible.
And you have to do it with near-perfect accuracy. I mean, it sounds like a premise for some dystopian logistics puzzle, doesn't it?
It really does, because, looked at through the lens of modern tech, it just seems like an impossible equation.
Right.
We assume that efficiency requires microchips and data centers. But what we are digging into today is a system that proves that assumption completely wrong.
Welcome to this deep dive, by the way. Today, our mission is to explore the legendary Dabbawallas of Mumbai and Karachi.
And this analog network not only exists, but it has been consistently outperforming modern logistics companies for over 130 years.
Which is just, it's wild. Over a century.
Relying entirely on human connection, bicycles, and the railway.
Yeah, we really need to establish the sheer scale of what we are talking about right off the bat so we can wrap our heads around it.
Definitely.
Based on our sources, we're looking at a workforce of roughly 4,500 to 5,000 self-employed individuals.
That's a lot of people coordinating without a group chat.
Huh, right. And every single day, they're moving between 175,000 and 200,000 hot lunch boxes.
Which are called dabbas.
Yes, dabbas. And these are collected from people's homes late in the morning. Then they're transported across the entire metropolis.
Usually delivered to very specific desks in these massive labyrinth-like office buildings.
Right. And this is the kicker. Every single empty box is returned to its exact origin in the afternoon.
It's basically magic. But, to really grasp how they move hundreds of thousands of lunches daily without descending into total chaos, we first have to understand why this incredible demand existed in the first place.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the why is just as fascinating as the how.
Right. So you have to rewind to Bombay in the 1890s.
Okay, setting the scene.
The city was undergoing this massive industrial boom, particularly in textiles.
Right, huge mills opening up everywhere.
Exactly, which triggered a massive influx of migrants from all across the Indian subcontinent.
So the population is just exploding.
Exploding, and suddenly you have this sprawling workforce commuting super long distances early in the morning.
Like long before a fresh lunch could even be prepared at home.
Precisely. They're leaving at dawn.
And I guess the concept of grabbing a quick bite at a corner cafe or going to a comprehensive office canteen, that just wasn't part of the infrastructure back then.
No, not at all. Fast food wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Plus, even if there were cafeterias, you have to remember this was a highly diverse workforce.
Right, people coming from all over.
And that diversity is actually the catalyst for the entire system. We are talking about deeply specific cultural, regional, and religious food practices.
Oh, I see. So it's not just about getting hungry at noon.
No. You had vegetarian diets with incredibly strict rules about cross-contamination. Specific spice profiles from different regions. Dietary restrictions that a generic corporate kitchen simply could not accommodate.
So if they wanted to eat and not violate their beliefs or customs, what did they do?
The only way these workers could maintain their health and cultural practices was by eating their own home-cooked meals.
It's an interesting parallel to today, actually.
Yes.
Well, we might see a modern office worker refuse the corporate cafeteria because they are tracking highly specific macronutrients, or maybe they're following a strict vegan diet.
Oh, yeah, the meal prep crowd.
Exactly. But in 1890s Bombay, this wasn't about a lifestyle choice or convenience, right? It was an absolute daily necessity.
Scaled up to an entire metropolis. It was an uncompromising demand.
Wow.
You had workers who needed their specific food cooked by their own families, but they had to commute miles away before the morning cooking could even begin.
So someone had to bridge that gap.
Right. And in 1890, a man named Mahadeo Havaji Bache recognized this gap.
Okay, the founder.
Yes. He started a lunch delivery service with about 100 men.
Just 100 guys doing local runs.
But what is truly remarkable is how this informal gang of delivery men adapted as the city around them just exploded in size.
Yeah, the sources mentioned they didn't just stay a loose collective, which makes sense. You can't run a citywide network on a handshake.
No, they evolved into a highly structured institution.
Right. Because
they had to. As Bombay sprawled, 100 men operating on informal agreements just couldn't manage the complexity.
Makes sense. So what was the next step?
By 1930, Bache attempted to unionize the Dabbawallas.
Okay, 1930. That's pretty early for formal gig worker unionization.
It was crucial, though. They needed to establish territorial boundaries so delivery men weren't competing or, overlapping on the same routes.
Oh, turf wars. Yeah, you got to sort that out.
Exactly. Then, fast forward to 1956, they registered as a formal charitable trust.
A charitable trust. That seems like an unexpected pivot for a lunch delivery service.
It does sound weird at first, but it makes perfect sense when you look at the physical toll of the job.
Ah, right. Manual labor.
Heavy manual labor. They needed a safety net. The trust allowed them to pool resources to care for workers who were injured or support the families of those who couldn't work anymore.
Oh, that's actually really smart. It's like a built-in welfare system.
Completely. And finally, in 1968, they established their commercial arm, the Mumbai Tiffin Box Suppliers Association.
So that's the modern structure.
Yes. That formalized pricing, dispute resolution, and client relations. They basically built an entire organizational architecture from the ground up.
Out of pure necessity.
Yep.
Which naturally leads to the actual mechanics of how they execute this daily. Because here's where it gets really interesting to me.
The logistics.
Yeah. Meeting this incredibly diverse, highly personalized demand across a chaotic city requires a sorting mechanism that has to be completely foolproof.
And remember, no computers.
Right. Now, the sources outline a visual marking system, but I couldn't quite picture how it works in practice. I mean, how do you label 200,000 nearly identical aluminum cylinders so they don't get lost?
It is essentially a masterpiece of constraint-driven design.
Okay, break it down for me. What are we looking at?
So the dabba itself is usually a multi-tiered cylindrical tin or aluminum container.
Like those stacking lunch boxes.
Exactly, but the magic is entirely in the paint on the outside.
The paint?
Yeah, instead of writing out a paragraph-long address with a name, a street, and a postal code,
which would take forever to read.
They use a tightly controlled language of symbols.
Oh, interesting.
A dabba will have a specific color code painted on it to indicate the starting train station.
Okay, so green means one station, red means another.
You got it. Then there are large letters or abbreviations for the specific collection points.
So the neighborhood where it was picked up.
Right. Next to that, a bold number designates the destination train station.
Okay, color for start, number for end.
And finally, there are specific, smaller markings indicating the exact building and floor where the box needs to end up.
I want to pause on those markings, actually, because there is a detail in the sources that changes the context entirely for me.
The literacy rate.
Yes. The average literacy rate of a Dabbawalla is an 8th grade level.
Which is a huge factor.
So my question is, how does a system relying on a workforce with limited formal schooling manage to route these boxes through massive, crowded train stations without just, making constant mistakes?
Well, literacy is only a barrier if your system relies on written language.
Ugh.
Right.
By limiting the variables and using universal visual symbols, bright colors, simple shapes, numbers, and bold abbreviations, the Dabbawallas completely bypass the need for complex delivery manifests.
You don't have to read an address line by line.
Exactly. You don't need to read an address. You just need to instantly recognize a green circle with a number 3 on it.
And anyone can do that.
It drastically reduces the cognitive load.
It's pure pattern recognition, optimized for speed.
And they need that speed because of how the daily flow operates.
Let's talk about that flow. A collecting Dabbawalla picks up the dabbas from various homes, right?
Yes, usually on a specially modified bicycle built to carry heavy wooden crates.
They bring them to a local sorting area, group them based on those visual codes, and then load them onto designated train coaches.
The local trains are the arteries of the whole operation.
So the train moves them across the city, they're handed off to local Dabbawallas at the destination station, delivered, and then the whole thing is reversed in the afternoon. That's the overview. But the truly staggering part of that flow is where the secondary sorting happens.
Secondary sorting.
They sort them at the local station, yes, but to save time and ensure they hit their delivery windows, a massive amount of sorting actually happens in the luggage compartments of the trains while they are moving.
But wait a second. How is that physically possible? The local train network in Mumbai is notoriously packed, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredibly crowded.
And they only have a few minutes between stops.
Right. So they commandeer specific areas of the luggage compartments. The Dabbawallas work in teams.
Okay.
The environment is chaotic, it's often dimly lit, and the train is literally swaying back and forth.
That sounds like a nightmare.
This is exactly why the painted symbols have to be large, bright, and instantly recognizable.
Because they're doing this on the fly.
As the train moves, they are actively pulling dabbas from different crates, reading the destination numbers, and passing them to the specific Dabbawalla responsible for the upcoming platform. They memorize the sequence of the stations and execute this, like, physical, collaborative sorting ballet before the train even comes to a halt.
That level of synchronized teamwork in a moving, high-pressure environment is just incredible.
It's a marvel to watch.
But, a perfect logistical system on paper or painted on a tin box only survives for over a century if the people executing it are fundamentally united.
Absolutely.
Because, a gig economy app can hire thousands of strangers, but this requires deep, deep trust.
And that trust is the engine of the entire operation. The cultural cohesion of the Dabbawallas is something a modern corporation could never, ever replicate.
Where does that cohesion come from?
Well, the vast majority of them belong to the Varkari sect of Maharashtra.
Okay.
This is a spiritual tradition heavily focused on egalitarianism and community service.
So they see this work as almost like a calling.
In many ways, yes. There are no strict hierarchies or rigid caste barriers in their work culture.
That's refreshing.
And they also hail from the same small network of villages near Pune, meaning many of them are actually related to each other.
Oh, wow. So it's basically a massive family business.
Basically, yes.
You can even see that egalitarian philosophy in how they present themselves in the city. The sources note their iconic uniform.
Right, the traditional white cotton kurta pajama tunics and the white Gandhi cap.
It's practical for the sweltering heat of Mumbai, obviously, but it also strips away visual differences in status.
Exactly. It creates an immediate sense of shared identity.
Everyone looks like part of the same team.
They are a deeply tight-knit community. In fact, the commitment to their shared roots is so strong that the entire delivery network completely shuts down for 5 days every March.
All 200,000 daily lunches just stopped.
Paused. The Dabbawallas collectively return home to their villages for their annual festival.
Can you imagine a modern logistics giant just putting out a notice saying, hey, everyone, we're suspending all operations for a week so our drivers can attend a family reunion?
Wall Street would have a meltdown.
It really highlights how different their priorities are. And that deep community trust isn't just cultural. It's baked right into their economic model, too.
Oh, the economics are fascinating.
Yeah. When a new Dabbawalla joins, they don't just sign an employment contract. The sources say they pay an initiation fee of 30,000 rupees to the union.
Which is a significant amount of money for them.
Right. But in return, they are guaranteed a minimum monthly income and a job for life.
They are essentially buying into a franchise.
That's a good way to look at it.
On top of the initiation fee, they are required to contribute capital in kind.
Meaning gear.
Right. They must bring 2 bicycles, a heavy wooden crate for the tiffins, and their white uniform. They are self-employed micro-entrepreneurs who actually own their specific routes.
It reminds me of the old system of a taxi driver buying a medallion to drive a cab in a major city.
Yes, exactly like that.
You buy the right to operate, and then you're your own boss. And the hierarchy reflects that, too. It's remarkably flat.
Very flat. You have the Mukaddams, who act as foremen or route supervisors, and the Gaddis, who are the delivery men.
So no middle managers?
No. Any conflicts are resolved by a council of 20 Mukaddams who are elected every 6 years.
That sounds like a really healthy system. And this brings up a complex reality I noticed in the text.
I think I know where you're going with this. The physical toll.
Yes, exactly. The physical toll of that freedom they value so highly.
That's unavoidable.
If this is such a secure, lifelong gig with a built-in supportive community and a guaranteed income, why do the sources explicitly state that the Dabbawallas actively discourage their own children from joining the profession?
That's the hard truth of it, because from the outside, it is very easy to romanticize manual labor.
Sure, we see the neat uniforms and the cool logistics.
We look at the logistical perfection, but we don't feel the physical reality of the job day to day.
It's grueling.
Think about the gig economy delivery workers you might see in your own city, braving traffic and weather. Now amplify that.
Oh, man.
The Dabbawallas are pedaling heavily modified bicycles loaded with massive wooden crates full of metal tins.
That has to weigh a ton.
It does, and they are doing this in monsoon rains that literally flood the streets.
Right, the Mumbai monsoons are legendary.
In extreme summer heat and while pushing onto packed commuter trains day in and day out.
The physical exertion over a lifetime must be immense.
It breaks your body down.
And the economics, while stable, aren't exactly creating generational wealth either. Our sources from 2014 noted the average monthly pay was around 8,000 rupees.
Which was roughly $131 at the time.
Right, so it's not a fortune.
It is a hard life. They take immense pride in what they've built, the service they provide, and their independence. But like any parent, they want upward mobility for their children.
They want them to have it easier.
Exactly. They endure the monsoons and carry the heavy crates, specifically so the next generation might have an easier life. Perhaps sitting in the very air-conditioned offices they deliver those lunches to.
Wow. That really grounds the whole story, doesn't it?
It takes it out of the realm of just being a cool business case study and makes it deeply human.
And yet, despite the gritty, grueling reality of the work, this combination of flawless analog logistics and deep cultural roots inevitably caught the attention of global business elites anyway.
Oh, did it ever?
Which led to what I can only describe as the most successful corporate telephone game in history.
Ah, yes. This raises an important question. The famous Six Sigma myth.
Yes. If you have ever watched a TED Talk on efficiency or read a business seminar syllabus, you have likely seen the Dabbawalla cited as a Six Sigma organization.
It's everywhere.
The claim is that they make less than one mistake in every 6 hours. Sometimes they claim 8 million deliveries. It is repeated everywhere as absolute gospel.
And it is a complete fabrication.
I love this part.
It is a fascinating case study in how business folklore is born and accepted as fact simply because it sounds impressive.
So how did a group of analog delivery workers get slapped with a hyper-specific corporate management label?
The trail leads back to a journalist named Subrata Chakravarti. He was writing a piece for Forbes in 1998. He was, understandably, deeply impressed by the operation.
Sure, it's impressive.
During his research, he asked Raghunath Medj, who was the president of the Dabbawalla Association at the time, how often they made a mistake.
And Midge gave him like a casual answer, right?
Yeah.
Basically saying, we almost never mess up, maybe one mistake every 2 months.
Exactly. It was a conversational expression of pride, not a statistical audit.
Right, he was bragging a little.
But Chakravarti took that off-the-cuff statement and applied some highly creative math.
Uh-oh.
He factored in the roughly 175,000 daily boxes, multiplied by the return trips, and calculated that one mistake every 2 months mathematically works out to one error in about 8 million operations.
Oh my gosh. And he published that calculated ratio in Forbes.
Yes, he did.
Okay, so that explains the 1 in 8 million number floating around. But where does the actual phrase Six Sigma enter the chat?
That happens 4 years later in 2002 at a conference. A reporter was interviewing the president of the Dabbawallas. Now, Six Sigma is a complex, highly rigid corporate management methodology popularized by companies like Motorola and General Electric.
Right, it's a very specific certification process.
It targets a defect rate of 3.4 per million opportunities. The reporter, who clearly only knew the Forbes statistic secondhand, asked the Dabbawalla president if they were a Six Sigma organization.
And a president who has likely never read a General Electric management manual in his life has no idea what Six Sigma is.
None. The reporter explains to him that it is a corporate term for near perfection.
And what does the president say?
He basically shrugs and replies, "Then we are, just ask Forbes."
That's amazing.
And then the reporter takes that interaction and writes that Forbes had officially certified the Dabbawallas as a Six Sigma organization.
Which Forbes never did.
Forbes never did any such thing. There was never an audit.
But the buzzword was just too catchy.
Exactly. It got picked up by other outlets, academics repeated it, and it became permanent folklore.
It is genuinely funny that a global management buzzword was applied to them purely through a massive misunderstanding.
Yeah.
But, as someone playing devil's advocate here,
Yeah.
does the fact that their perfect statistic is essentially bad math diminish what they've actually accomplished?
Not in the slightest.
That's what I figured.
The Dabbawalla's efficiency doesn't need a corporate buzzword to be valid. The real-world proof of their success is the sheer volume they move daily and the massive recognition they've actually received from people who study systems rigorously.
Like who?
Well, the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad did a thorough case study on them in 2005.
Oh, nice.
Harvard Business School added a case study to their compendium in 2010.
Oh, wow. Harvard studied them.
Yes, focusing on how they deliver high-level service with a remarkably low-cost operating system.
And it isn't just academics studying them, right? Massive modern corporations actively want to leverage their network. Our sources point out that by 2010, Bharti Airtel, which is a giant telecom company, hired the Dabbawallas to distribute advertising pamphlets alongside the lunches.
Paying them a commission, too.
Yeah, because no other network could guarantee that level of direct, reliable access to the workforce.
The cultural recognition is just as high. Global leaders in efficiency treat them as a required visit.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Richard Branson spent a day with them. U.S. Commerce secretaries have studied them.
That's a pretty wild guest list.
It gets better. Prince Charles was so deeply impressed by their operation that he actually invited a group of Dabbawallas to his wedding to Camilla Parker Bowles in 2005.
Okay, that is incredible. Imagine going from delivering lunches in Mumbai to a royal wedding.
This system works so incredibly well that it transcends its function and becomes a marvel.
It is a massive triumph of simplicity. I mean, in a world where our immediate default is to throw a new app, a heavier piece of software, or some complex algorithm at every problem we face.
We always look for the high-tech fix.
Always. But the Dabbawallas prove that sometimes the most robust solution is a bold color painted on a tin box.
Executed by a deeply connected community of people who care about their work.
Yes.
They optimize for reliability and resilience through simplicity, completely rejecting unnecessary complexity.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want you, the listener, to consider how that applies to your own life.
It's a great thought exercise.
When you are staring down a massive, complex project or looking at an overwhelmingly cluttered inbox, what is the simple analog color code you could implement?
How can you strip away the digital noise?
Exactly. Find the absolute most direct path from point A to point B.
That is the perfect way to look at their legacy.
Thank you.
But, there's one final fascinating detail from our sources that I want to leave you to mull over, and it really speaks to the future.
Oh, what is it?
As we've discussed, the Dabbawallas rely heavily on the traditional infrastructure of the city, specifically the bicycles and the old local railway trains.
Right, the arteries of the operation.
But the sources note that they do not use modern infrastructure improvements like the Navi Mumbai Metro.
Really? A brand new, sleek transit line, and they avoid it. Why?
Because they literally cannot fit.
Wait, what do you mean they can't fit?
The sleek, modern new metro cabins, the automated doors, the narrow aisles, they are designed purely to maximize space for the individual human commuter.
Oh, wow.
They do not have the physical capacity to accommodate a worker carrying a massive wooden crate loaded with hundreds of tiffins.
That's kind of tragic, actually.
So it raises a vital question. As our cities rapidly modernize and build these beautiful, tech-driven new transit lines, optimizing entirely for the sleek and the individual.
Are we pushing out the community?
Exactly. Are we inadvertently designing out the very physical space needed for the brilliant, hyper-efficient communal systems that help build these cities in the first place?
That is a lot to think about. Next time you see a food delivery app glitching on your screen, take a moment to remember the painted tin boxes, the moving train compartments, and the human network that has been quietly and flawlessly feeding a city for over 130 years. If you were tasked with designing the ultimate covert operative from scratch, you'd probably engineer something that looks remarkably like an owl.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, picture a highly advanced biological stealth bomber, but, wrap it in a cozy, harmless-looking sweater.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
Right, and that contradictory image is basically what we're deconstructing today. Welcome to a brand new deep dive. We are taking a comprehensive look at one of the most familiar yet profoundly misunderstood predators on the planet.
It's just this really wild biological paradox.
Yeah, exactly. Our goal today is to examine how a creature that looks, well, adorable enough to print on a greeting card is actually an evolutionary masterpiece of lethal stealth. It's a hyper-specialized hunting machine that also doubles as this hugely polarized global cultural icon.
And you really hit the nail on the head with the word paradox. You have this animal that is universally recognized across almost every human culture, right? Yet it's biologically engineered to never be seen or heard by the things it hunts.
Which is terrifying if you're a mouse.
Oh, completely. The mechanics of how they operate in the dark, the extreme anatomical adaptations, and the millions of years of evolutionary pressure that shaped them, it all reveals a level of engineering that is just genuinely staggering.
Well, I think we have to begin with the adaptation that kind of defines them, right? Which is their ability to hunt in the pitch dark without making a single sound.
Yeah, their silent flight. It's their most famous party trick.
Because anyone who's ever startled a flock of pigeons knows that birds taking flight usually sound like a like a frantic, noisy burst of applause.
Right, because creating lift inherently requires moving massive amounts of air, and moving air creates turbulence, and turbulence creates noise.
So to bypass that whole physics problem, owls had to completely redesign the standard avian feather.
They really did. So the standard bird feather is essentially built like a sheet of microscopic Velcro.
Okay.
Most birds have these tiny hook-like structures called radiates, and they interlock tightly to create a stiff, highly aerodynamic airfoil.
Which is great for speed, I imagine.
Exactly. That stiffness maximizes speed and lift, but it cuts through the air really harshly. That's what generates that familiar whooshing sound when a bird flaps its wings.
But owls don't have that.
Well, they sacrifice that stiffness entirely. Their flight feathers are larger than average, and they lack that dense network of interlocking radiates.
Which means the edges of their feathers are structurally much softer, right? Like almost frayed.
Yeah, exactly. They aren't really slicing through the air, they're more gliding through it. And they pair that softness with a leading edge on their primary flight feathers that is serrated.
Serrated, like a steak knife.
More like the teeth of a really fine comb. When an owl flaps its wings, those serrated edges break up the major air currents flowing over the wing, which drastically reduces the aerodynamic disturbances.
So instead of one large, noisy rush of air,
Mhm.
the airflow is just shattered into these microturbulences that barely make a sound.
Right. But that structural change only handles the aerodynamics. They also have a secondary acoustic defense built right in.
Wait, there's more.
Oh, yeah. The surface of these flight feathers is covered in a specialized microscopic velvety structure, and this velvet acts as a physical sound dampener.
Oh, wow.
It specifically absorbs noise frequencies above 2 kilohertz.
So it's basically the biological equivalent of lining your wings with acoustic foam, like the stuff you find on the walls of a recording studio.
That's a great analogy, yeah. They have built-in sound dampening that absorbs whatever residual noise those serrated edges fail to eliminate.
So the result is that the sound of their flight drops completely below the hearing threshold of their primary prey.
Exactly. Small mammals, like mice and voles, they simply lack the auditory range to detect an owl swooping down on them.
And crucially, that noise reduction also drops into a frequency range where the owl itself can still monitor its own flight noise, so it can adjust its wing beats in real time to maintain absolute silence.
Which is incredible, but, nature rarely grants a superpower without exacting a pretty steep toll.
Right. There's always a trade-off.
A massive one in this case. To achieve this level of absolute silence, they entirely abandon the uropygial gland.
The oil gland, right?
Yes. It's the gland most birds rely on to preen and waterproof their feathers. Barn owls, for instance, just don't use it.
Wait, so they traded being waterproof for being quiet? That seems like a massive design flaw for a bird that lives outside.
I know, it sounds crazy, but they traded basic weatherproofing for ultimate stealth, and it means they are entirely grounded by bad weather.
Because the velvet soaks up the water.
Exactly. They're highly vulnerable to heavy rain because those velvety, unoiled feathers just act like sponges.
So how did they survive storms historically?
Well, historically, barn owls adapted to this vulnerability by hunting indoors during storms. They'd use agricultural buildings, which is actually how they earned their common name.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Barn owls.
Right.
Yeah.
But as modern agricultural practices shift and those traditional structures disappear, this lack of waterproofing becomes a critical survival issue today.
And it's a much more immediate threat than just like going hungry for a night, right? Because their plumage soaks up water so rapidly, they are incredibly susceptible to drowning in things as mundane as livestock drinking troughs.
It's really tragic, actually. If a barn owl falls into a smooth-sided water trough, those acoustic feathers waterlog almost instantly. They physically cannot pull themselves out.
So conservation groups regularly have to advise farmers to place floats or ramps in their troughs specifically to prevent this.
Exactly. They are perfectly adapted for silent death from above, but only if the air is perfectly dry.
Which really highlights how specialized they are. But I guess being perfectly silent is only a tactical advantage if you actually know where your target is hiding.
Right. And since they don't utilize echolocation to map their environment like bats do, they have to rely on a visual system that pushes the absolute limits of vertebrate anatomy.
Yeah, let's talk about their eyes, because
Okay.
owls possess massive eyes relative to the size of their skulls.
Huge. In fact, calling them eyeballs is factually incorrect.
Wait, really? Why?
Because they aren't spherical. They are actually elongated tubes.
Okay, so it's literally like having a pair of heavy-duty binoculars permanently built into your skull.
Yes. And because of that tubular shape, the eyes cannot move independently. They are rigidly locked into place by these bony striders called sclerotic rings.
Right, so if you or I want to look at something in our peripheral vision, we just dart our eyes to the side. An owl physically cannot do that.
Not at all. To shift their gaze even slightly, they must move their entire head.
Which explains the mechanical reason behind their famous, almost supernatural neck rotation. It isn't just a spooky party trick, it's an absolute biological necessity.
Exactly. To compensate for having completely immobile eyes, they can rotate their heads up to 270 degrees in either direction.
Which, just based on human anatomy, sounds terrifying. I mean, we have 7 neck vertebrae, and turning around too fast can pinch a nerve.
Right, but owls have 14 neck vertebrae. That grants them double the flexibility right at the structural level.
But the real marvel is how they manage that extreme rotation without severing the blood supply to their own brains, isn't it?
Oh, it requires an intricate masterclass in vascular engineering.
How does it even work?
Well, the openings in their vertebrae, they're called the foramina, where the vital arteries pass through to the brain. They are about 10 times larger than the artery itself.
10 times larger. Because in humans, that bony opening is practically flush against the blood vessel, right?
Exactly. But owls evolved this massive amount of vascular slack, so their arteries actually have room to bend and flex within the bone without getting pinched when they turn their heads.
That is wild. And they pair that with an enlarged vascular junction at the base of the brain, right? The anastomosis.
Yes, the largest anastomosis of any bird. That junction ensures that even if an extreme head turn briefly compresses one arterial pathway, the blood just effortlessly reroutes through another one.
So they maintain constant pressure to the brain no matter what.
Exactly. It allows them to maintain a continuous, unblinking lock on their environment. And those massive tubular eyes give them unparalleled binocular vision and depth perception in low-light conditions.
But that hyper-specialization comes with a really fascinating blind spot.
It does. They are extremely farsighted.
So they can spot a mouse scurrying through tall grass from an incredible distance, but they can't clearly focus on anything within a few centimeters of their own face?
Right. If the prey freezes right under their beak, they are effectively blind to it.
So how do they actually catch it at that range?
To compensate for that close-range blindness, they evolved these things called phyloplumes.
Which are like little hairs?
Yeah, they're specialized hair-like feathers positioned around their beaks and feet that function very similarly to a cat's whiskers.
Oh, I see. So once the strike is imminent and the prey is within inches, the owl just switches from visual tracking to tactile feedback to guide the final blow.
Exactly. But vision and touch only account for part of the hunting sequence. The way they process sound is arguably even more sophisticated.
Yeah, we have to talk about their hearing. But first, I think we should clarify the visual illusion of the great horned owl.
Oh, the horns, yes. Those prominent tufts on the top of their heads that look like mammalian ears are just feathers.
Right. They serve behavioral and camouflage purposes, but play absolutely no role in hearing.
None at all. The true ears are hidden beneath the feathers, and in many species, they are placed asymmetrically on the skull.
Wait, asymmetrical, like one is physically higher than the other.
Yes. One ear opening is positioned higher up on the skull, and the other is positioned lower down.
Having crooked ears sounds like a developmental flaw, honestly.
It does, but it effectively turns their head into a highly calibrated three-dimensional sound tracking device.
How so?
Well, when a rustling sound originates from the forest floor, those asymmetrical placements mean the sound waves hit each ear at a slightly different millisecond.
And we are talking about a microscopic time difference here, right? Like roughly 30 microseconds.
Yes, 30 millionths of a second.
That is just incomprehensible.
It is, but the owl's brain possesses the neurological processing power to compute that minute discrepancy.
So by registering which ear heard the sound first and calculating the delay, the owl can pinpoint the exact vertical and horizontal coordinates of the sound source.
Precisely. The owl simply swivels its head until the rustling registers in both ears at the exact same microsecond.
And the moment that auditory equilibrium is achieved, the owl knows it is staring dead center at its target, even if it's completely hidden under a layer of snow.
And their entire facial structure acts as an acoustic amplifier for this whole process.
Like the facial disc, the round part of their face.
Yeah, that stiff, round arrangement of feathers framing their face operates basically as a parabolic reflector. It physically cups environmental sound waves and funnels them directly toward those asymmetrical ear openings.
Even the shape of their beak contributes, doesn't it? It points sharply downward to ensure it doesn't deflect incoming sound waves away from the facial disc.
Exactly. Every single square inch of their head is optimized to act like a satellite dish.
So you have a predator that flies in absolute silence, tracks a target with microsecond auditory precision, and locks on with tubular night vision.
And then comes the final phase, delivering lethal force.
Right. The sheer crushing power of their talons is staggering.
Biologists measure that grip strength in newtons, which represents the release force required to basically pry the talons open. And it scales pretty dramatically across the owl family.
Like, how much variance are we talking about?
Well, a tiny burrowing owl operates with a release force of about 5 newtons. The barn owl requires about 30 newtons.
Okay.
But an apex species, like the great horned owl, boasts a crushing power exceeding 130 newtons.
Wow.
They don't just pierce their prey, they use that immense pressure to crush the spinal column and just knead the body of the animal.
130 newtons.
Yeah.
I mean, that is akin to dropping a heavy set of cast iron weights directly onto a surface the size of a postage stamp. It's just instant, devastating pressure.
It really is. And that variance in talon strength brings up the massive size disparity within the owl family itself.
Right, because on one end of the spectrum, you have the elf owl. It weighs a mere 31 grams and measures just over 13 centimeters long. Like, it could comfortably sit in the palm of your hand.
It's tiny. And on the opposite end, you have these massive predators like the Eurasian eagle owl or Blakiston's fish owl.
Those are huge.
Yeah, those birds can weigh upwards of 4.2 kilograms, possessing wingspans reaching 190 centimeters. That's nearly 2 meters across.
But regardless of whether a species is the size of a sparrow or the size of an eagle, they almost all exhibit a trait called reversed sexual dimorphism.
Which is really interesting, because in the vast majority of avian species, the males are the larger, more robust individuals, and they often sport showy plumage.
But in owls, it's backwards.
Yeah.
The females are almost always physically larger and heavier than the males.
Yes. And evolutionary biologists have debated the functional reasons for this for a long time. There are 3 pretty compelling theories that attempt to explain it.
What's the first one?
The first theory is rooted in foraging efficiency. During the critical breeding season, the male is tasked with hunting not just for himself, but for the incubating female and eventually the chicks.
Oh, that makes sense. So the hypothesis suggests that smaller, lighter males evolved to be more agile and aerodynamic.
Exactly, allowing them to expend less energy while effectively hunting quick, evasive prey to sustain the entire family unit.
It's basically the biological equivalent of using a sleek sports car for rapid grocery runs, rather than a heavy transport truck.
I love that analogy, yes. Now, the second theory shifts the focus to the female's specific metabolic needs.
Because they have to sit on the eggs for so long.
Right, because females endure these long stationary periods incubating eggs, carrying greater body mass provides a crucial buffer against starvation.
So if the male has a string of unsuccessful hunting nights, her extra fat reserves keep her and the eggs viable.
Yes, and furthermore, that extra size and strength equip her to physically dismember larger prey into manageable pieces for the hatchlings once they arrive.
Okay, so both the agility hypothesis and the starvation hypothesis focus on practical survival mechanics.
But the third theory, sexual selection, delves into the behavioral dynamics of avian courtship.
And it suggests that owl dating is utterly brutal.
It really is.
The premise is that because females are large, powerful, and heavily armed with those crushing talons, they are entirely capable of violently rejecting a prospective mate.
Exactly. Therefore, the males literally evolved to be smaller, lighter, and faster, simply so they could successfully outrun a female if a courtship display went poorly.
So natural selection may have heavily favored males who were just exceptional at fleeing.
It highlights a highly precarious mating dynamic, definitely. If a suitor fails to impress, he needs rapid acceleration to escape an incoming strike backed by, 130 newtons of force.
Talk about survival of the fastest escaper. So these highly specific anatomical quirks, the asymmetrical ears, the vascular slack, the reverse dimorphism, these are not recent developments, are they?
Not at all. They are the refined output of millions of years of rigorous evolutionary trial and error.
When we look at the fossil record, we trace the origins of the owl lineage back roughly 60 to 57 million years ago, right deep into the Paleocene era.
Yes, and this is an incredibly significant time frame. It places their emergence almost immediately after the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event.
The asteroid impact that famously eradicated all non-avian dinosaurs.
Exactly, making them one of the oldest known groups of land birds currently alive.
So while early mammalian ancestors were just beginning to establish a foothold in this devastated global ecosystem, Early owls were already taking to the skies. They were already beginning to perfect the mechanics of silent flight and nocturnal hunting.
Right. And by the time the planet transitioned into the Neogene period, which was around 25 million years ago, recognizable barn owls were already dominating skies over places like southern Europe.
They possess a lineage that has successfully weathered climatic shifts, continental drifts, and massive ecological upheavals over 60 million years.
Which brings us to a really profound and tragic modern paradox. An animal family that has proven its resilience over geological timescales is currently highly vulnerable today. Almost all owl species are now listed under the CITES Treaty, which regulates international trade in endangered flora and fauna.
It's sad, really. They survived the aftermath of an asteroid, but they're struggling to survive human infrastructure.
They face compounding threats from rapid habitat loss, the widespread agricultural use of rodenticides, which completely poison their food supply, and constant vehicle collisions.
But the threat that is perhaps most startling is the rise of the wild meat trade.
Yes.
In 2008, the Wildlife Trade Monitoring Network, Traffic, released a report detailing a massive seizure by authorities in Malaysia.
That seizure involved 900 owls, specifically barn owls, spotted wood owls, and brown wood owls.
900? That's insane.
It is. But what makes the report so alarming is the condition they were actually found in. They were plunked and prepared as quote-unquote oven-ready meat.
That is just horrifying. It marks a terrifying shift in how these animals are perceived. I mean, they are apex predators, vital to controlling rodent populations, yet in this context, they were scooped up and commodified like unregulated poultry for illegal exotic meat markets.
It completely strips away all the majesty of their evolutionary design and reduces a 60-million-year-old lineage to a black market delicacy.
And the sheer scale of poaching 900 owls really highlights a massive organized demand.
It does, and this commodification stands in stark contrast to how humanity has historically interacted with these birds.
Right, because owls have occupied the same environments as humans for our entire history, sharing our agricultural spaces and our night skies.
Yeah.
And their silent nocturnal nature has made them this massive, profound canvas for human mythology.
And that cultural canvas is deeply fractured. There is a distinct duality in how global cultures have processed the existence of the owl.
Yeah, let's talk about that. We can look at the dark mythology first, which is rooted heavily in dread and superstition.
In numerous traditions, the owl is viewed as a grim harbinger of death.
Like where?
Well, among the Kikuyu people of Kenya, encountering an owl or hearing its call is a direct omen that a death is imminent in the community.
Wow. And in the Americas, various Apache and Seminole traditions feature owl bogeymen, right? These terrifying figures invoked to keep children well-behaved and safely indoors at night.
Exactly. And in Aztec cosmology, Mictlantecutli, the god of the dead, is prominently associated with owls.
That association is actually so deeply ingrained that there is a Mexican proverb still referenced today, Cuando el tecolote canta, el indio muere, which translates to, when the owl cries, the Indian dies.
It's so widespread. You see similar themes in the Hojogo traditions of Wisconsin, where a talking owl serves as a prophet of tribal decline.
And moving across the Atlantic to medieval Europe, owls were heavily associated with the bubonic plague, dark magic, and were even utilized as symbols in anti-Semitic caricatures.
It is a massive, widespread cultural projection of malice.
But directly parallel to that, you find a rich tapestry of light mythology that reveres the bird entirely.
Ancient Greece is probably the most famous example. The little owl was the constant companion of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, effectively making the bird the symbol of Athens itself and inextricably linking it to knowledge.
In Hinduism, the owl serves as the Vahana, or the divine mount, of Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth and prosperity, tying the bird to fortune and agricultural abundance.
And in ancient Chinese culture, despite some regional associations with misfortune, owls were also frequently cast as fierce protectors. They were carved into art to ward off evil spirits and invoked to bring strategic luck in military endeavors.
So you have a single biological family that is simultaneously venerated as a beacon of wisdom and prosperity and feared as a demonic omen of plague and death.
Exactly. It's an incredible duality.
I think we can synthesize a psychological theory for why human history treats them this way.
Oh, I love to hear it.
So we associate owls with deep wisdom, largely because of their unique anatomy. They possess those large, forward-facing tubular eyes set firmly in a flat facial disc.
Right.
Out of all the birds in the animal kingdom, they look the most human.
That's very true.
When we look at an owl, we see a creature that appears to be wearing glasses, returning our gaze with binocular focus. That visual resemblance prompts us to project human intelligence and contemplation onto them.
It is a compelling psychological mechanism. The forward-facing eyes of a fellow predator trigger a deeply ingrained sense of peer recognition. We see a face that mirrors our own, so we assume a mind that mirrors our own.
Exactly. But on the flip side, we associate them with death and malice simply because they operate in the shadows. They fly without making a sound, they emerge only at night, and they call out from the darkness.
Which inherently taps into our most primal evolutionary human fears of the unseen threats that move in the night.
Right. So the owl is perpetually caught in the crossfire of human psychology, our vanity in seeing a face like ours, clashing with our ancient primal fear of the dark.
That perfectly illustrates how our global myths often say much more about human psychology than they do about the animal in question. We project our highest intellectual ideals and our deepest existential terrors onto a bird that is, in reality, just utilizing a 30 microsecond delay in its asymmetrical ears to locate a vole under the grass.
So, to synthesize our journey today, we examined a predator that relies on microscopic velvet and serrated wing edges to achieve perfectly silent flight.
Even though it requires trading away their natural waterproofing, leaving them vulnerable to something as simple as a water trough.
We explored an anatomical marvel featuring tubular eyes, 14 neck vertebrae allowing for a 270-degree rotation, and massive vascular slack to keep the brain functioning.
We detailed how they deliver 130 newtons of crushing force with their talons and analyzed the evolutionary pressures that resulted in smaller males who might just need the speed to outrun a bad date.
And we traced their resilient 60-million-year lineage back to the Paleocene era, contrasting that deep-time survival with their heartbreaking modern vulnerability to habitat loss and the illegal wild meat trade.
And finally, we unpacked their polarized, dual existence in human mythology, revered as divine scholars of wisdom and feared as silent harbingers of death.
It has been a fascinating exploration of an animal we all recognize but rarely truly understand. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final, lingering question that builds directly on the psychological theory we just explored. Imagine for a moment that the evolutionary timeline had taken a slightly different path. What if owls had never developed those human-looking, forward-facing eyes?
That's a great thought experiment.
What if instead their eyes were positioned on the sides of their heads, much like a pigeon or a chicken? Would human history still have elevated them as wise, noble scholars of the animal kingdom? Or would we simply view them as creepy, nocturnal scavengers picking off rodents in the dark?
It really makes you wonder.
How much of our global reverence for this majestic, lethal bird is based on its actual biological prowess, and how much is based purely on a coincidental resemblance to our own human faces? Next time you look at an animal you hold in high regard, ask yourself, what exactly are you seeing in them? Are you observing the animal, or are you just admiring a reflection of yourself?